On January 28th, I watched Cruel Intentions, which came out in 1999. This was basically just a softcore porn, complete with all the classic setups. All it was missing was the pizza delivery guy. Some foul language and a bit of mild drug use aside, this movie more or less gets its R rating entirely due to the strong sexual nature. Even with almost no violence to speak of, and not so much as a butt cheek shown, there's just so much build-up, sexual tension, and implication, all added with probably the most famous lesbian kiss in movie history. It's not so much surprising this movie gets its R rating, as it is slightly disappointing. It's always a bit crazy to think of the levels of violence, action, and especially horror movies are allowed to get away with. But even for a fairly big budget and mainstream movie like this, that based its entire story around a hypersexualized character manipulating the people around her, the most they could get away with was that controversial kiss. Look, I know it's going to sound like a weirdly perverted complaint, but this movie was basically just one giant tease. Nudity and full-on sex obviously aren't a requirement to tell most stories, but when the movie is based so heavily on sex as a subject, it just becomes that much more apparent what movies like this can't get away with, and it's never good to feel like the story is being edited down by censors to protect our sensibilities. The story was able to build an immense amount of sexual tension though, and most of that is due to the three lead female characters played by Selma Blair, Reese Witherspoon, and Sarah Michelle Gellar. Gellar plays Catherine, that hypersexual character I mentioned, at the center of the story. She's also the stuck-up, rich, drug-addicted sister to Sebastian, played by Ryan Philippe. She's an extremely manipulative puppet master type, and the true instigator of the plot, which is a sex bet with her brother that he can't sleep with the nation's most famous virgin, Annette Hargrove, played by Witherspoon. The weird part of their bet, though, is that if Sebastian wins and is able to bang the virgin, he also gets to have sex with his sister Catherine. All Catherine gets if she wins is her brother's car, so it doesn't really seem worth it, except for the fact that she seems pretty eager to lose the bet. It just adds to this super creepy incest angle that I'd kind of heard about before seeing this film, but it was still very effective in building Catherine as this hypersexualized character. The angle of Sebastian trying to sleep with Annette, the perfect virgin, is the main story here, with the subplot following Selma Blair's Cecile, the young, dumb, and needing to learn about sex virgin, who, after being opened up to the wonders of sex through that magical kiss with Catherine, and her first experience masturbating, becomes a complete slut pretty much overnight. Since it's the secondary storyline, it doesn't really get the attention it needs to be a completely believable story, and it starts to fall too much into that category of a badly written porno, as opposed to the main story, which actually got the time it needed to develop fully. And look, although setups for both plotlines are basically ripped from the most basic pornos, with the lack of actual sex and a bit more runtime, you get a lot more focus on actually building a believable story. But if the two stories had been balanced better, or maybe if they had just committed entirely to the major one, it would have done a bit better, I think. The acting is clearly going to be better than your average porno too, with Reese and Ryan doing most of the heavy lifting here. They're able to elevate what could have been a pretty dull story, and did enough to keep me interested throughout. The climactic character change can be seen coming, but the major plot twist I found a lot less predictable. The details of the plot are precisely what make this movie interesting though, so I don't want to spoil too much, because I think this is a film that will be best on first viewing, and knowing as little past the initial setup as possible is best. It's a difficult movie for me to judge, because I try to judge films based on how successful they are at achieving their emotional goal, i.e. if it's a comedy, did it make me laugh? If it's a horror, was I scared? And with this movie, the goal was clearly to arouse, and on that aspect, it succeeds. But it also failed to get the tears it was trying for at the end, and that was probably the more important one. Isn't it also fair for me to be a little critical of a movie for spending most of the runtime just trying to be sexy, and not doing much more to achieve that goal than casting three young, attractive actresses and getting them to play characters basically cut out of a porno? The end of this film was an unexpectedly nice ending, and I thought it would be a lot more tragic. It actually felt a bit tacked on, so it could have that more Hollywood feeling ending. It just felt a bit safe for a movie that was actually pretty controversial and dark up until that point. I'm really curious to know if there were any alternate endings for this one. I ended up giving it a 6 out of 10, and its current list position for me was 620. So thanks for watching.